The word landed in the middle of the room like something thrown carelessly into a crowd. NPCs. Sloane Whitaker said it with her champagne glass raised and her head tilted toward the cluster of bridesmaids surrounding her, her voice carrying easily over the music, because she had that specific quality, the ability to fill any space she chose to fill without apparent effort. She gestured toward the staff with the back of her hand. Not at one person. At all of us. "Don't worry about them," she said. "They're basically NPCs." The laughter that followed was not the warm kind. It was the sharp, performed kind that people produce when they want to be seen agreeing with the most powerful person in the room. I was standing beside the lighting console near the far wall, Q tablet in hand, monitoring the event flow timeline. The skyline glittered through the floor-to-ceiling glass walls of the glass atrium. Photographers moved through the 300 guests. The chandeliers were set to the precise warm tone I had specified in the pre-event run sheet. Everything running exactly as I had designed it. And Sloane was using the word that gamers use for background characters. The ones with no inner life, no agency, no existence beyond serving the player's needs. Then she looked directly at me. "Relax," she said with a small, satisfied smile. "It's weird when the help acts sentient." The room laughed again. My fingers tightened around the tablet. Sloane drifted back toward her bridesmaids with the easy grace of someone who has just said something clever and is moving on before anyone can complicate it. Around me, the staff absorbed the moment in the way staff always absorb these moments, with the particular stillness of people who have been trained to swallow things and keep moving. The bartender near the east wall shook his head once, very slightly, without looking at anyone. One of the newer servers, a young woman named Cora, who had been on the team for 6 weeks and was still learning how these events operated, looked at me with an expression I recognized. The expression that asks whether what just happened was actually okay and whether anyone is going to acknowledge that it wasn't. I gave her a small, steady nod. "Keep moving. Do the job. I see you." She nodded back and went back to her station. I returned my attention to the Q tablet. Because the truth about running events like this one is that the emotion you feel in the moment has to wait. The lighting sequence doesn't care about your feelings. The catering timeline doesn't pause while you process being called a background character by someone who has no idea she's standing inside a system you built and currently control. But I stored the moment carefully because this was not the first time I had encountered Sloane Whitaker, and every time I had encountered her before, the same pattern had emerged. "My name is Mara Ellison, operations manager for the Glass Atrium event venue, one of the most sought-after event spaces in the city, known for its floor-to-ceiling skyline views, its fully integrated technical systems, and the kind of seamless experience that clients spent years on waiting lists to access." Seamless is a deceptive word. It implies ease. It implies things simply flowing without friction. What it actually means for the people behind the curtain is hundreds of decisions made in the correct sequence at the correct time, executed by a coordinated team operating from a detailed plan that has been rehearsed, adjusted, and rehearsed again. My job was to be the person who made the seamless happen. Every light in the venue, from the entry pathway to the chandelier settings to the accent strips, along the service corridors, ran through my console. Every speaker, every security camera feed, every door lock on every restricted access point. The communication systems connecting the bar team, the catering crew, the security staff, and the front-of-house coordinators all ran through my headset and my board. Events like Sloane's 300-person engagement party looked effortless from the outside. From my position at the console, they looked like a living system that required constant, careful management to stay upright. Sloane had never once looked at my side of the room and understood what she was seeing. I had met Sloane Whitaker approximately 14 months before this engagement party. Her family, the Whitakers, whose name appeared on 2 buildings downtown and 1 wing of the city's main hospital, had booked the Glass Atrium for a charity gala, the kind of event that generated significant press coverage and donor engagement for causes that genuinely needed the support. The cause was real. The event was well-funded, the logistics were complex, and had been managed carefully. Sloane had attended as a family representative, not in an operational capacity, but as someone whose presence was considered part of the event's social presence. She had spent the first hour treating the venue staff the way some people treat the furniture in a hotel room, as objects whose only relevant quality is whether they're functioning correctly at any given moment. She snapped her fingers at servers when she wanted something. Not the casual, distracted snap of someone unaware of the habit. The deliberate, directed snap of someone who uses it to establish a specific dynamic. She spoke about vendors within their hearing range in a way that was designed to be overheard. I had watched all of it from my position near the operations station, managing the gala with one eye on the timeline and one eye on the temperature in the room. And then something happened that stayed with me long after the gala ended. The server's name was Cora. Not the same Cora from this evening. A different young woman, also named Cora, who had been working events at the glass atrium for 3 months and was still building her confidence in the fast-moving environment of a large private event. She was carrying a full champagne tray through the main crowd when someone moved unexpectedly in front of her path. The tray tilted. 2 glasses slid. The crash was small, not catastrophic, not dangerous, just the kind of mid-event sound that makes a room pause briefly before returning to itself. Cora looked stricken in the way that new staff look when they understand that something visible has just happened on their watch. She knelt immediately to collect the glass pieces. A colleague appeared within seconds to help. The guests nearby were fine. The floor was cleared in under 2 minutes. Sloane watched the entire thing from 5 feet away. Then she said, loud enough for the surrounding guests to hear clearly, "Maybe hospitality school isn't for everyone." The people around her laughed. Cora didn't look up. She finished collecting the glass and stood and walked to the service hallway. I found her there 3 minutes later. She was fine. She was also very clearly trying to hold something together that she was keeping away from the event floor. I told her she had handled it exactly right. Management told the team to stay professional. Sloane walked away smiling. Inside the events industry, reputations travel faster than most people realize. Vendors talk. Venue staff compare notes across different properties. Coordinators who work multiple events share information the way any professional community shares information. Informally, specifically, and with the particular accuracy that comes from direct experience. Sloane Whitaker had a reputation. Difficult in a way that went beyond the standard demanding client category. The demanding client wants things done a specific way and communicates that clearly, sometimes impatiently. That's manageable. That's actually part of the job. Sloane wanted things done a specific way and used the process of communicating it to establish something about the people she was communicating it to. Every request was a small performance. Every complaint was slightly louder than it needed to be. Every correction happened in public, rather than private, with maximum audience. Vendors who had worked her family's previous events had opinions about being booked again. But the Whitaker name carried weight. The Whitaker family's events attracted press and donors and the kind of social traffic that kept a venue's profile elevated in competitive ways. So venues took the bookings and staff prepared themselves. And tonight was the largest event the Whitaker family had booked in 3 years. 300 guests. Full press coverage, a contract value that had been cited internally as the year's most significant booking. Sloane had wanted a night people would talk about for years. The engagement party for Sloane Whitaker and her fiancé, a corporate attorney named Fletcher Aldane, had been in planning for 4 months. 4 months of detailed coordination between the Glass Atrium's events team and the Whitaker family's event planner, a professional woman named Ingrid who was very good at her job and who had, during our first planning meeting, given me a look across the table that communicated without words that she knew exactly what working with this client was going to involve and had made her peace with it. 300 guests, city influencers, press photographers, donors from the family's charitable network, social figures whose presence at an event like this one was itself a form of currency. Custom floral arrangements that had required a separate logistics coordination with the florist. A specific champagne selection that had to be sourced from a supplier we hadn't used before. A DJ whose technical requirements had taken 2 additional planning sessions to properly integrate with our sound system, plus the standard full-scale event operations, lighting design, catering coordination, security management, vendor access, guest flow, emergency protocols, compliance monitoring. All of it built into a running order document that was 47 pages long and that I had reviewed 3 times in the week before the event. By 8 o'clock that evening, the party was running beautifully. For approximately 40 minutes, then the demands began. The first request came through Ingrid at 8:42. Sloan wanted the music louder. We adjusted, within the parameters of the sound ordinance that applied to the venue, but adjusted. The second request came at 9:05. The lighting over the main floor needed to be warmer. The current setting, which I had designed specifically in consultation with the event photographer to optimize the visual quality of the evening's documentation, was apparently not to Sloan's satisfaction. We adjusted. I rebuilt the lighting sequence on the fly and updated the cues for the rest of the evening. The third request was for additional champagne service beyond what had been staged for the first phase of the evening. The bar team adjusted. They worked faster and restocked earlier than planned. Each adjustment on its own was manageable. Each one was the kind of mid-event modification that experienced teams handle without visible disruption. But each one also cascaded into the timeline in ways that required downstream recalibration. Moving other cues, coordinating resequenced service timing, communicating updates to staff across 3 different areas of the venue simultaneously. By 9:30, the timeline had absorbed 4 separate modifications and was being held together by the specific competence of a team that had been trained for exactly this. The team was managing. Then the capacity issue arrived. The contract for Sloan's engagement party specified 250 guests. That number was not arbitrary. It was the fire code maximum for the main hall configuration being used that evening. A configuration with specific table arrangements, service corridor access points, and emergency exit pathways that only worked safely with 250 or fewer people occupying the space. At 9:47, the security team lead, a careful and experienced man named Officer Petros, called my headset. "We're at 263, he said, "and she's still waving people through the entrance." I looked at the security feed on my console. The main entrance showed Sloan near the door, greeting late arrivals with the open, generous energy of a host who had decided the more the better. "Hold the entrance," I said to Officer Petros. "I'm coming out." I navigated through the staff corridor to the front of the house. Sloan saw me approaching. I kept my voice professional and measured. I explained that we had reached contracted capacity, that the fire code limit was 250, and that additional guests would need to wait in the venue's designated waiting area until the event transitioned to the outdoor terrace segment scheduled for 10:30. Sloan looked at me. "Relax, NPC," she said. Her friends laughed. She waved the next group of arrivals past the entrance. Chapter 10. I returned to the operations station and documented the capacity warning in the event log. Time, 9:51 p.m. Nature of incident. Client instructed to hold entrance at fire code capacity limit. Client response, non-compliant. Current guest count, 267. I sent a brief update to the venue director, a steady and principled man named Mr. Ose, who was on call for the evening. He acknowledged the message and asked me to continue monitoring. Officer Petros did what he could at the entrance. He moved to a firmer position and began redirecting new arrivals to the waiting area. But Sloan's social circle was large, and her word carried weight among the event guests, several of whom had heard her tell the security team to let everyone through, and were acting accordingly. By 10:05, the count was 279. By 10:15, it had reached 291. 29% over the contracted and legal limit for the space. I updated the event log with each count. I was building a record. Not because I had made a decision yet about what to do with it, but because in situations like this one, accurate documentation is the foundation of every consequential action that might need to follow. The record was clean and time-stamped and specific, and the evening was not finished, escalating yet. The bar team lead called my headset at 10:20. Her name was Simone. Experienced, reliable, someone who had been managing bar service at large events for 8 years and whose judgment I trusted completely. "We have guests requesting service without wristbands," she said. Her voice was steady, but the underlying concern in it was real. "At least 12 in the past 15 minutes. Some of them are visibly intoxicated already." The wristband system at the glass atrium was tied directly to the check-in process. Every guest received a wristband when their ID was verified and their name was confirmed on the guest list. No wristband meant no verified entry, which meant the person either hadn't come through the official entrance or hadn't had their identification properly processed. With nearly 300 people in a space designed for 250, and the entrance having been overridden by the client multiple times, there were now guests in the room whose presence hadn't been formally documented. "Log each refusal with a timestamp," I told Simone. "Don't serve unwristbanded guests under any circumstances. If anyone escalates, contact Officer Petros directly." "Understood," she said. I made another entry in the event log. The party that Sloane Whitaker had described, in the months of planning that preceded tonight, as the night that would define how the world saw her and Fletcher. That party was accumulating a documentation trail that was moving steadily toward a threshold I had been trained to recognize. At 10:31, Sloane took the microphone. The scheduled program called for brief remarks from Sloane and Fletcher at 10:45, after the transition to the terrace had begun to thin the main floor crowd, and the evening had moved into its final celebratory phase. Sloane did not wait for 10:45. She simply walked to the DJ setup, took the microphone from its stand, and addressed 300 people, 29% of whom were not supposed to be in this room, with the complete confidence of someone for whom schedules were written by other people. "To the best night of our lives," she said. The crowd cheered. Glasses raised. The sound level in the room spiked in the particular way that 300 people celebrating simultaneously creates. A physical pressure as much as a sound. The DJ, who had not been told to pause his set for an unscheduled speech, and who found himself mid-transition between tracks with a live microphone suddenly active, looked toward the operations station with the specific expression of a vendor who needs instruction. I gave him the hand signal for hold and maintain. He held. Behind the visible surface of the party, the champagne, the skyline, the laughter, the photographs, the staff team was managing a situation that had been steadily building toward a pressure point for over an hour. And then the situation accelerated. The argument between Sloane and the DJ happened at 10:44. He had resumed his set after the unscheduled speech concluded, following the pre-approved playlist that had been finalized 3 weeks earlier in a detailed planning session with Sloane's team. Sloane wanted a different song. Not a request passed through the event coordinator. Not a note sent to the DJ through the standard client communication protocol that had been explained in the planning documentation. She walked directly to his setup, across the floor, past the guests, past the service staff, and told him what she wanted. He explained, professionally, that the playlist had been finalized in advance and that mid-event changes of this type needed to go through venue operations. Sloane did not accept this. The conversation that followed was loud enough that guests within approximately 15 feet could hear specific words. Phone screens tilted. The energy in a room shifts when the host of an event is visibly arguing with a vendor in front of their own guests. It's a particular kind of shift, not panic, not crisis, but a quality change in the atmosphere. People become slightly more watchful, conversations lower slightly, the evening's narrative begins to feel uncertain in a way that the best parties never allow. I documented the incident in the event log. Then I pulled up the venue contract on my console and opened Section 11.3. Section 11.3 of the Glass Atrium event contract was titled Operational Safety and Compliance Authority. I had read this section many times. I had been present when the venue's legal team had updated its language 18 months ago. I understood every word of it with the precision that comes from having managed events where its existence mattered. The section stated, in direct and unambiguous language, that the Glass Atrium's operations management held full authority to modify or terminate any event in progress if guest behavior, client instruction, or evolving conditions created risk of regulatory violation, staff safety compromise, or guest safety risk. This authority was not contingent on client approval. It was not a negotiation. It was a clause that existed because the venue held the event license, the liquor license, the fire code compliance responsibility, and the legal liability for everything that happened inside its walls during any event it hosted. Invoking it was not a small decision. It would create significant social fallout. It would generate press. It would produce a confrontation with a client from one of the city's most prominent families. But the decision to invoke it had a threshold, and that threshold was tied to documented violations, not to personal feelings, not to the NPC comment, not to the history with Sloan. To documented violations. I was very close to that threshold, and Sloan was still accelerating. At 10:58, Simone's voice came through my headset again. "She's at the bar," she said. "She's telling us to keep pouring for the gentleman in the gray jacket." I looked at the bar camera feed on my console. The gentleman in the gray jacket was visibly unsteady. He was leaning heavily against the bar surface, and his movements had the particular imprecision of someone who had consumed significantly more than was safe. The law regarding serving visibly intoxicated guests was not a guideline. It was a condition of the venue's liquor license. A license that could be suspended or revoked for a single documented violation involving knowingly serving an intoxicated patron. "Don't serve him," I said to Simone. "Log it." "She's insisting," Simone said. "Don't serve him," I repeated. "Whatever she says." I watched the camera feed as Simone spoke to Sloan at the bar. The conversation lasted about 30 seconds. Sloane's posture changed in the way it always changed when she encountered someone who would not simply comply. Then Sloan said something to Simone that I could not hear through the camera, but that Simone relayed to me through her headset 2 minutes later. "She told me she'd make sure I never worked another event in this city," Simone said. Her voice was steady. Experienced people absorb threats differently than newer staff. Not without feeling them, but without losing their footing. I looked at my console. I reached for the direct line to Mr. Ose. The operations room at the glass atrium was positioned at the back of the main hall, behind a smoked glass panel that allowed me to see the full floor without being the visual focus of the room. From my position, I could see the entire party. The main lighting board with its 47 programmed cues for the evening, the audio console linked to the DJ's setup, and the venue's internal speaker system. The security feed showing all 6 camera angles across the venue. The bar service monitoring system. The entrance count display, currently reading 302. The communication board with channels for every department operating that evening. All of it within reach. I had built tonight's operational system from the planning stage forward. Every cue timed, every contingency mapped, every communication protocol tested before the first guest arrived. The party existed. The music, the lights, the beautiful ambiance that 300 people were currently experiencing because of this room and the decisions made in it. I thought about Sloane's word, NPC, a background character, a figure in a game who exists only to serve the player, who has no inner life, no agency, no ability to affect the narrative in any meaningful way. My hand rested on the console. My finger was near the system command. I wasn't making a decision yet. I was waiting for the last piece. Mr. Ose answered on the second ring. I gave him the full summary. Current guest count 302, 52 over the contracted limit and the fire code maximum. Documentation, complete event log with timestamps covering every capacity warning, every client non-compliance response, every staff report from the bar and security teams. Liquor license risk. Documented instruction from the client to serve a visibly intoxicated patron, refused by bar staff, logged with timestamp. Staff safety. Verbal threat made to a staff member by the client, logged. Mr. Ose listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for 4 seconds. "Has she been formally warned of the compliance risks in writing?" he asked. "Verbally, twice, with venue operations staff as witnesses, not in writing." "Do you have everything documented on your end?" "Complete log, time-stamped, camera references noted for each relevant incident." He was quiet again. Outside the operations room window, I could see Sloan near the center of the floor, moving through her guests with the energy of someone at the peak of exactly the evening she had imagined. Then my headset buzzed. The DJ's voice, short and tight. "She's coming back for the mic," he said. "She wants to do another announcement." I heard the feedback squeal of an unmanned microphone being picked up. Sloane's voice filled the venue. "Someone tell the NPCs to stop hovering. It's ruining the vibe." The room laughed. My headset was already connected to Mr. Osei. "Follow the clause," he said. The NPC comment, taken alone, would not have been the reason. I want to be precise about this, because precision matters in moments like what was about to happen. The clause existed to protect people. The guests in an overcrowded room who didn't know the room was over capacity. The intoxicated man at the bar who had been instructed to receive additional service. The staff member who had been threatened with career consequences for enforcing a law. The clause was not a revenge mechanism. But the microphone comment had done something specific that the previous incidents hadn't quite achieved. It had created witnesses, not just the staff who had been documenting privately. 300 guests, photographers, press representatives, social media figures, had just heard the host of this event publicly describe the people managing it as non-entities in front of a room full of people with cameras. Which meant the moment that followed was not going to happen in a private corner. It was going to happen in front of everyone. And the documentation that preceded it, clean, complete, organized, and covering every regulatory violation that had built up over the previous 90 minutes, was precisely the foundation needed to make what happened next defensible to every party who would scrutinize it afterward. Mr. Osei had said, "Follow the clause." I sat down at my console. I opened the system command. I began the sequence. The music faded first. Not abruptly, a controlled fade over approximately 8 seconds. The kind of transition the system was capable of producing smoothly. One moment, the DJ's set was at full energy. 8 seconds later, the venue was running on the background ambient track that we used for service periods between set segments. Guests noticed. They noticed the way people notice when something in a party changes. A small collective alertness, heads turning slightly, conversations pausing mid-sentence. The lighting shifted next. The event lighting sequence, the warm, carefully designed atmosphere that I had built for this evening, transitioned to the venue's standard operational lighting. Still warm, still entirely presentable, but noticeably different from the curated ambiance of the party setting. More heads turning. The bar service system sent a pause notification to every service terminal simultaneously. Simone and her team, who had been briefed on what the system command sequence meant from our pre-event protocol review, set down their equipment and moved to the standing position we used during formal announcements. I activated the PA. My voice was calm and clear. "Attention guests, for safety and compliance reasons, this event will be concluding shortly. Security staff will assist with the exit process. We thank you for joining this evening's celebration." 300 guests looked around at once, and Sloane Whitaker turned from the center of the floor and found my face behind the smoked glass panel of the operations room. She crossed the floor with the specific speed of someone who is trying to move quickly, while maintaining the appearance of not moving quickly. I was already at the door to the operations room when she arrived. Not inside, positioned in the doorway, the physical statement of someone who is present and accountable and not hiding behind a panel. "What are you doing?" Her voice was controlled, but the edges were not. "The event is concluding," I said. I didn't authorize anything to conclude. The venue's operations authority doesn't require your authorization in these circumstances, I said. Section 11.3 of your contract. She stared at me. "You're shutting down my engagement party." "I'm concluding an event that has been operating at 52 guests over the fire code limit for the past hour, with documented non-compliance after 2 formal warnings, a documented attempt to instruct bar staff to serve a visibly intoxicated patron, and a threat made to a staff member by the event client." I kept my voice exactly level. "All of it is in the event log," I said, with timestamps. The room around us was moving now, guests processing the announcement, some already gathering their things, security staff positioned at the exits, photographers capturing the changed atmosphere of an evening that had shifted unexpectedly. Sloane was very still. Her face had gone through several expressions in the past 45 seconds and had arrived at something I hadn't seen from her before. Not anger, something that came after anger when the thing you're angry at won't move. "You're going to regret this," she said. She said it quietly, which was different from how she usually operated. Sloane Whitaker was a public performer. She spoke for audiences, calibrated her volume for room size, understood that words said loudly in front of witnesses carried different weight than words said privately. The fact that she said this quietly told me she was not performing anymore. "The documentation supports the decision completely," I said. "The event log is available to any party who requests it, including your family's legal team, through the standard post-event process." "My family will." "I'm sure they'll have questions," I said. "Mr. Osei is available to address those questions. The venue director's contact information is in your contract materials." She looked at me with the expression of someone who has just understood that the resource she has always used in situations like this, the force of her personality, the weight of her family's name, the simple unwillingness of other people to hold their ground when she pushed, had encountered something it couldn't move. The security team was managing the guest exit professionally and efficiently. The floor was clearing in the organized, calm way that a well-trained staff produces when they have clear direction. The party was ending. Not messily, not dramatically, just ending. The way well-run things end when the person who designed them decides it's time. Security's formal announcement came through the PA system at 11:17. Officer Petros's voice was steady and professional, the same tone he would have used for any operational announcement at any event. "The glass atrium thanks you for joining this evening's celebration. For safety compliance reasons, the event is now concluding. Exit routes are marked to your left and right. Staff are available to assist." Guests responded in the ways guests always respond to unexpected endings. Some gathered their things immediately and moved toward the exits without drama. The experienced eventgoers, who have been to enough large functions to know that when a venue makes a formal announcement, the correct response is simply to comply. Some stopped to speak with friends or take a final photograph. Some pulled out their phones and began recording, which, given the dozen or so press photographers already present, meant that documentation of the event's ending was happening from multiple independent angles simultaneously. Sloane stood in the center of the floor. She was not moving toward the exit. She was looking across the room at me with the specific stillness of someone who is deciding whether there is anything left to do. I watched her gaze move from me to the operations room to the clearing floor around her. The skyline was still beautiful beyond the glass walls. The chandeliers were still lit. The flowers were still perfect. The party simply wasn't running anymore. And the person who had described the staff as background characters had just discovered that the background had agency. She walked toward me one final time. The floor had thinned enough that the crossing was visible, guests nearby watching from peripheral attention. She stopped close enough that the conversation was private, but in a space where we were clearly visible to anyone who looked. "You did this," she said. The same sentence she had probably been rehearsing since the announcement. "The documented violations triggered the operational authority in your contract," I said. I followed the clause. This was about the NPC comment. I looked at her steadily. "The NPC comment is in the event log under the category of client conduct creating hostile work environment for staff," I said. "It's one entry among 19. It was the most recently documented entry before I contacted the venue director." She looked at me for a long moment. "You planned this." "I documented the violations as they occurred," I said. "Planning would have looked different. Planning would have been easier." I let that sit for a moment. "Your fiancé's guests are being helped with the exit," I said. "The bar team is closing correctly. Security is managing the floor. Everything is proceeding professionally." I held the tablet in my hands. "The event log will be available to your family through the formal post-event process," I said again. Then I met her gaze, clearly and directly, and said, "Is there anything else I can help you with tonight?" The story moved through the events industry at a speed I had not fully anticipated. Not through official channels, through the informal, highly efficient communication network of vendors, staff, coordinators, and photographers who had been present or adjacent to the evening, and who, like all professional communities, shared what they knew. The images circulated: the cleared floor, the security escort, the general atmosphere of an engagement party that had ended 73 minutes before its scheduled conclusion. The Whitaker family's event planner, Ingrid, called me the morning after. She was professional and brief. She said she had reviewed the event log and that she understood the decision that had been made. She thanked me for the clean documentation. The family's corporate lawyer requested the event log formally 3 days later through the standard post-event process. The log was provided exactly as it had been compiled, complete, time-stamped, unedited. We did not receive a formal legal claim. I understood, from the nature of the documentation, why. The Whitaker family's priority booking status at the Glass Atrium, the designation that gave them preferential access to the venue's most sought-after dates, was reviewed by the board. The review concluded with a formal downgrade of that status. Several vendors who had been present that evening when approached for future Whitaker bookings cited scheduling conflicts. The events industry has a long memory. 6 months after the engagement party, the venue's board formalized a promotion that had been under review since before that evening. Venue Operations Director. The role expanded my authority beyond the operations management function. Formal responsibility for the operational framework of every event hosted at the Glass Atrium, including vendor relations, staff training standards, and the compliance policy that governed how Section 11.3 was applied and documented. Mr. Oze called me on the morning the board confirmed it. He said the documentation from the Whitaker event had been referenced in the board's review as an example of exactly the standard they wanted the venue to maintain across all future events. I thanked him. I sat in the operations room that evening, the same room I had been standing in when I ran the system command that ended Sloane's party, and looked out through the smoked glass panel at the empty main hall. The lighting was in maintenance mode, flat and practical. The chandeliers were dark. I thought about the word she had used. NPC. A background character. Present but not real. Useful but not consequential. There when you need something, and invisible when you don't. The people who believe this about the staff running their events forget one thing. The party, the music, the lights, the carefully orchestrated atmosphere that makes a room feel like exactly the night you imagined, doesn't exist without the person at the console deciding to run it. And it stops the moment that person decides not to. Sloane Whitaker wanted a night people would talk about for years. She got one.